This is Tom Fox, and I'd like to welcome you to a new season of Adventures in Compliance. This season, we're going to take up the second set of 12 short stories published in the Strand Magazine in 1893 and 1894, which were collected in the book The Memoirs of Sherlock Holmes. The Memoirs of Sherlock Holmes was published in the United Kingdom by G. Loons and in the U.S. by Harper's and Brothers. It's the second collection featuring the consultative detective Sherlock Holmes. The Final Problem was published in this series, and that remains one of the top Sherlock Holmes stories of all time, as Doyle was determined to kill off Sherlock Holmes, his most famous character, due to not simply its popularity, but how Holmes in many ways had taken over the life of Doyle the writer. I hope you'll take this opportunity to not simply listen to this podcast series, but also to reread the stories in the Memoirs of Sherlock Holmes. Today we begin a special two-part episode on the final story from the Memoirs of Sherlock Holmes, The Final Problem. In this short story, Holmes confronts his arch nemesis Moriarty, and in today's episode, we begin our look at that story. If you've enjoyed this series or enjoy Sherlock Holmes, I hope you'll subscribe, rate, and review this podcast wherever great podcasts are listened to. Adventures in Compliance is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network. The story begins as Holmes arrives at Watson's residence one evening in an agitated state with grazed and bleeding knuckles. Much to Watson's surprise, Holmes has apparently escaped 3 separate murder attempts that very day after a visit from Professor Moriarty, who warned Holmes to withdraw from his pursuit of justice against him to avoid any regrettable outcome. First, just as Holmes was turning a street corner, a cab suddenly rushed towards him, and he managed to leap out of the way just in time. Second, while Holmes was walking along a street, a brick fell from a house, just missing the great detective. Finally, he called the police to search the entire area, but he could not prove it as anything other than an accident. Finally, on his way home to Watson's home, Holmes himself was attacked by a thug with a kosh. Holmes managed to overcome his assailant and handed him over to the police, but admitted there's virtually no hope of proving that the man was the employee of the criminal mastermind, Professor Moriarty. Holmes had been tracking Moriarty and his agents for months and was on the brink of snaring them all and delivering them to the dock. As we know, Moriarty is a criminal genius behind a highly organized and extremely secret criminal force, and Holmes would have considered it his crowning achievement if he could have defeated Moriarty. But Moriarty is out to thwart Holmes' plans and is well capable of doing so, for, as Holmes himself admits, he is the great detective's intellectual equal. As Holmes asks Watson to come to the continent with him and gives him unusual instructions designed to hide their tracks to the boat train at Victoria Station. Holmes is not quite sure where they will go, which seems odd to Watson, yet Holmes is certain that he has been followed to Watson's house and then makes off by climbing over the back garden wall. The next day, Watson follows Holmes' instructions to the letter and finds himself waiting in a reserved first-class coach for his friend, but an elderly Italian priest is there. The cleric soon makes it apparent that he is in fact the great detective in disguise. As the boat train pulls out of Victoria, Holmes spots Moriarty on the platform, making a gesture in an unsuccessful attempt to stop the train. Holmes is forced to take action as Moriarty has obviously tracked Watson despite extraordinary precautions. Holmes and Watson alight at Canterbury, making a change to their planned route. As they are waiting for another train to New Haven, a special one-coach train roars through Canterbury as Holmes suspected it would. It contains the professor who has hired a train in an effort to overtake Holmes. Holmes and Watson are forced to hide behind their luggage. Having made their way to Strasbourg via Brussels, the following Monday, Holmes receives a message that most of Moriarty's gang has been arrested in England and recommends Watson return there now, as the detective will likely prove a dangerous companion. Watson, however, decides to stay with his friend, ever loyal to the end. Moriarty himself has slipped out of the grasp of the English police and obviously is with them on the continent. Holmes and Watson journeys to Switzerland, where they stay at a town called Meergen. From there, they fatefully decide to take a walk, which will include a visit to Reichenbach Falls, a local natural wonder. Once there, a boy appears and hands Watson a letter saying there's a sick English woman back at the hotel who wants an English doctor. Holmes realizes at once it is a hoax, although he does not say so. Watson goes back to see the patient, leaving Holmes by himself. Upon returning, Watson finds that the innkeeper has no knowledge of any sick Englishwoman. Realizing at last that he has been deceived, he rushes back to Reichenbach Falls, but finds no one there, although he does see two sets of footprints going out into the muddy end path with none returning. There is also a note from Holmes explaining that he knew the report to Watson was a hoax, but he's about to fight Moriarty, who has graciously given him enough time to pen this last letter. Watson sees that towards the end of the path there are signs that a violent struggle has taken place, but there are no returning footprints. It is all too clear that Holmes and Moriarty have fallen to their death down the gorge while locked in mortal combat. Saddened, Dr. Watson returns to England. The Moriarty gang are all convicted on the strength of evidence and secured by the great detective himself. Watson ends his narrative by saying Sherlock Holmes was the best and wisest man he has ever known. Compliance programs change the name of penalties or sanctions for individual employees who violate the FCPA to consequence management. So there are consequences to every action, particularly those that are unethical or illegal. And finally, benevolence. Holmes often assists in cases without expectation of a reward. This altruism is a powerful ethical stance demonstrating a sense of duty and willingness to help others simply because it's the right thing to do. I've monikered myself as the compliance evangelist because I believe in the worldwide fight against the international scourge of corruption. I thought for this final episode of the Memoirs of Sherlock Holmes, we would take a look at some of the compliance lessons from the final problem. There are several, and of course, while this is primarily a mystery, there are several principles I think that can be applied to the field of compliance. Number one, attention to detail. Obviously, Holmes is well known for his keen observational detail. Every CCO and compliance professional must pay close attention to the details, whether those are contracts, laws, regulations, business processes, due diligence, you name it. Small discrepancies or oversight can lead to significant compliance issues. Number two, deductive reasoning. Holmes often uses deductive reasoning to solve complex cases. Compliance professionals should be skilled at analyzing data and information to identify patterns, anomalies, and potential risks. This is where data-driven compliance can really assist. And of course, since the evaluation of corporate compliance programs in 2020, the DOJ has mandated compliance have access to that data. Number three, thorough research. Sherlock Holmes is well known for his extensive research, and compliance professionals also must understand a wide variety of industry regulations, laws, and practices. And if you don't know them, you have to learn them. If you move into the compliance realm, you have to learn them. You can learn them, but you must stay informed and continually understand what the legal and regulatory obligations are. Collaboration. Obviously, Holmes collaborates with Watson and other experts, and collaboration is a fundamental key in the compliance profession. It can be with cross-functional teams, legal, finance, and others, or more importantly, the business unit. So every compliance officer must collaborate. Risk assessment. Surprised to see this in a Holmes novel? Well, Holmes evaluates potential risks and threats in every case. Every compliance program starts with a risk assessment, and the DOJ has mandated that you must assess your risks when your opportunities change. So every time you have a new business strategy, a new geo-region, a new product, a new service, a new customer, you need to assess those risks, to identify vulnerabilities, and then take steps to mitigate those risks through your risk mitigation strategy. Next up, discretion. Holmes often operates in secret and keeping sensitive information confidential. Well, in compliance, you do have to do the same and use discretion to handle confidential information, but also report as appropriate. Ethical behavior. Holmes is a champion of social justice and ethical behavior, and compliance professionals must uphold the highest ethical standards for themselves and their organizations to act in legal and ethical manners. Problem solving. Sherlock Holmes' ability to solve complex problems is central to his character. Compliance professionals must be adept at finding solutions to complex compliance, legal, regulatory, and business challenges, addressing the issues as they arise, but more importantly, delivering a solution that works. Number 9, continuous learning. Holmes is continuously expanding his knowledge and skills, and compliance professionals must embrace continuous learning to stay updated, not simply on regulatory and legal changes, but also what's going on in your individual company and your business and your competitor's business, so that you can be prepared. And finally, persistence. Sherlock Holmes never gives up on a case until it's solved. Every compliance professional must have perseverance and commitment to addressing compliance issues, even when faced with numerous obstacles. In conclusion, while the final problem may not directly relate to compliance, the principles embedded by Sherlock Holmes in this adventure can inspire and guide compliance professionals in your work to maintain ethical and legal standards in your organization. If you've enjoyed this episode, I hope you'll subscribe, rate, and review to Adventures in Compliance, wherever great podcasts are listened to, or perhaps even on YouTube. I also hope that you will take this opportunity to reread some of the great Conan Doyle short stories found in the collected works, the Memoirs of Sherlock Holmes. If you'd like to take a deep dive into a particular short story, I'd love to visit with you. So please give me a shout at tfox@tfoxlaw.com. Adventures in Compliance is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network. I hope you will join me again next week, where I continue my look at this, in many ways, the best Sherlock Holmes story, but certainly one of the most interesting, The Final Problem. This is Tom Fox. Thank you so much for listening. I look forward to visiting with you again next week.